Thank you very much, Brianna. And thanks to all of you for being here. We really appreciate you taking time from your schedules to join us today on what's obviously a really important issue. We're here today to discuss President Trump's cruel and unlawful decision yesterday to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, well known as DACA. And you're going to be hearing from some folks who we greatly appreciate here today who are directly impacted by this cruel policy. We also want to share what we're going to do about it as the state of Washington. So I'll be giving you some introductory remarks. I'll be followed by our governor, Jay Inslee, who I really appreciate taking time from his extremely busy schedule to join us today. And just a note on Governor Inslee, I'll be introducing him shortly, but I work with a lot of AGs around the country, and I know that I am especially blessed in this dark time in our nation's history to have a governor who is as vocal in his views on some of the outrageous things that are happening seemingly on a daily basis with this administration. And to say he's supportive of my office and my legal team would be a significant understatement. And I just want to really emphasize how much, that's just one thing I have to worry about. There's a lot we have to worry about in the office, but the support of the governor in what we're doing is not one of those things, and that's something I do not take for granted. I'm also joined by a couple folks who you will recognize from earlier litigation around the travel ban. So to my far right is Marcia Chen. Marcia is an attorney and assistant attorney general in our Wing Luke Civil Rights Unit. She was also very involved in the travel ban litigation. And then Colleen Melody is on my far left. Colleen Melody. Colleen's the head of that civil rights unit. We are missing today our Solicitor General, Noah Purcell. He does have a good excuse. He and his wife had a baby yesterday, so report everything is good and healthy, but Noah's with us in spirit. But as obviously you might imagine, been very involved in this as well. As I mentioned before, the governor and I are both very honored to be joined by a group of dreamers today. Again, folks who will be directly impacted by the president's decision if it's allowed to stand. And so what we're going to do is I'll speak first, the governor will then speak. We'll then have each of these individuals introduce themselves, and two of them at the end, Paulo and Faride, will give lengthier remarks. But we're joined by Graciela Nunez, Mustafa Padilla, Ray Corona, and Jose Manuel Carrillo. Those four will introduce themselves briefly and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll have two dreamers speak in more detail at the conclusion. And then, of course, we'll be happy to take your questions. So today we are filing, and the complaint will literally be filed any minute now, a multi-state lawsuit challenging the Trump administration's decision to roll back protections for dreamers. The list at this time, and just keep in mind this is a fluid situation. I expect additional states to join this complaint or file other lawsuits. But at this point, there are a total of 12 entities, 11 states, and the District of Columbia. I'll just read through them briefly. Washington, New York, Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Mexico, Illinois, Hawaii, North Carolina, Oregon, Rhode Island, Washington, D.C., and I believe Delaware as well. Am I right, Colleen? And Delaware as well. So hopefully that adds up to 12. But again, this is I just want to emphasize the fluid situation, but that's the current status of the states and the District of Columbia that will be filing today. We'll be filing this lawsuit together as a group, all as plaintiffs in the Eastern District of New York. My team's been working, Marcia and Colleen and the team been working on this for weeks in anticipation of the president taking an action along the lines of what he took yesterday. It's been an intense body of work. Washington has co-led this effort with Massachusetts and New York. It has been a significant amount of work, as you might imagine, to put together a complaint of this complexity and size with the declarations we'll be talking about. And my goal is to give you a flavor of the legal arguments that we'll be making as well. But I deeply appreciate the legal team, again, working through their weekends, giving up their Labor Day weekends, working closely with other states to make this happen. It's a big body of work. So what I'll do is talk through a little bit about the DACA program and the benefits of that program to our state, and then briefly detail our legal arguments before I turn over to the governor. As you know, there are about 800,000 dreamers in our country. There are more than 17,000 dreamers in the state of Washington alone. They were brought to this country as children by their parents through no fault of their own. DACA has allowed them to remain in this country to work legally, to open bank accounts, purchase cars and homes, attend and pay tuition at our state's colleges without fear of deportation. They contribute about $51 million every year in state and local taxes in Washington state. Without DACA, one estimate suggests the state economy could lose nearly $260 million in tax revenues over the next decade. The University of Washington, Washington State University, as well as Columbia Basin College and Big Bend Community College have also contributed declarations to our complaint. They've been a key player in this litigation as they were with the travel ban. Thanks to DACA, Dreamers attend our colleges and universities. More than 100 attend the University of Washington and more than 150 attend Washington State, just to give you two examples. The president's cruel decision not only impacts all these Dreamers in Washington State, but it'll also impact our economy, our business, and our state as a whole. That's why companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Starbucks have written strong declarations in support of our lawsuit. I deeply appreciate those entities taking the time to step up and support this litigation in such a meaningful way. Additionally, state agencies are filing declarations as well. It's our colleagues in state government who are Dreamers as well, who are working every day on behalf of the people of the state who are adversely impacted, and that's why you're seeing declarations from our state treasurer and other state agencies as well. We deeply appreciate all of their support. I'll try and be a little bit brief on the legal claims, give you enough detail so you understand where we're going. As is always the case, legal claims are complex, right? There's been a lot of work going into them. I'll do my best to speak about them at a high level, but obviously we're happy to take any questions you have in more detail about any of these claims. Think of our claims in two buckets. We have constitutional claims. I'll talk about equal protection and due process. Constitutional claims. We also have statutory claims. We allege that the Trump administration is violating federal statutes. So think of sort of two buckets of claims. I'll start with something called the Administrative Procedure Act. Now, my suspicion is a lot of folks' eyes will glaze over, even lawyers, once you start talking about the Administrative Procedure Act. Okay, that's I get that. But it may sound technical, but believe me, it is not technical. Just to give you one example, when President Obama issued his executive order on immigration, DAPA, a few years ago, when Republican AGs challenged that successfully in a Texas federal court, they were successful based on an Administrative Procedure Act claim. That's what stopped President Obama's executive action on immigration was an APA claim, an Administrative Procedure Act claim. So it may sound technical, I get that, but these things matter a great deal. And so speaking to that at a high level, we have two claims within what I call the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act. One, importantly, is that the president's action is what lawyers would call arbitrary and capricious. The action was arbitrary and capricious. The stated premise for the president's action is that DACA is illegal, right? That's what you heard yesterday. DACA is illegal. There's just one problem with that. No court has actually held that. In fact, up until yesterday, the Department of Justice has repeatedly argued that DACA is legal. Overnight, there was a change, and that's something you cannot do. There is a standard. You cannot take an action that's arbitrary or capricious. We've had months, years of assertions that DACA is legal from the federal government. No court has said it is illegal. The federal government cannot, without any process at all, claim that's no longer the case. Secondly, within the Administrative Procedure Act, we have a separate claim. We call this a process claim. So I have 9-year-old twins. Sorry for the twins analogy, but when they do their homework, I say you have to show your work when you do your math. You've got to show the work. You can't just give me the answer. You've got to show how you got to that answer. Well, we have the Administrative Procedure Act from a process standpoint requires the federal government to essentially show their work when they're making certain important decisions. They can't just announce it. They've got to go through a process to do it. Again, this is not technical. We have filed 14 lawsuits against this administration. I'm not keeping score, but so far we're 4-0, okay? Every federal judge who's examined any of our claims has agreed with the state of Washington, okay? Some of those claims have been under the APA, and we prevailed because the federal government has not shown their work. You can't just sometimes unilaterally make a change. You've got to go through a process to do that, and it's our assertion in this case they failed the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act, on that front as well. We are also alleging that the president's action violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. I might add the APA claim, that would essentially stop the president's action in its track. As Colleen has said to me, as a good analogy, think of it as a board game. They'd have to go back to start and start all over again. We are also alleging that it violates the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution. Think again back to the travel ban. What we had to show with the travel ban was that a motivating factor behind the president's decision announcing the travel ban was racial animus, right? Was animus towards Muslims. A key thing here is that it doesn't have to be the primary motivating factor or the only motivating factor. It just has to be a motivating factor in a decision. We're making the same allegation in essence here as well. The president has made numerous statements on the campaign trail and in office disparaging Mexicans, calling them criminals, thugs, bad hombres, among other names. Nearly 80% of Dreamers are of Mexican descent. In our lawsuit, we allege the president's own statements make clear that the majority of Dreamers are being targeted for discriminatory treatment based on their national origin. I would just ask you and the folks who are listening or viewing this right now to ask yourself one question. If the overwhelming majority of Dreamers were Caucasian, does anybody really think this president would have taken the action he took yesterday? Finally, we're also claiming that the president's action violates the Regulatory Flexibility Act. Now, admittedly, I've never referred to the Regulatory Flexibility Act before, but it's an important act, adopted by Congress with bipartisan support. What it does is support small businesses, nonprofits, local jurisdictions of government. And what it says is if you're going to take an action, a federal agency, that's going to harm, for example, a small business, you've got to go through a process. You've got to analyze it. You've got to show your work. There's going to be a negative impact to small businesses. You can't just unilaterally do that. You've got to show your work. You have a process. You've got to analyze it, the pros and the cons. It's an act of the Congress, bipartisan act of the Congress. Again, this is about the proper procedure, which this administration has ignored time and again. And believe me, there are plenty of businesses and jurisdictions in this state and nonprofits that have invested significant resources into Dreamers like the folks who are here and the other 17,000 Dreamers in the state of Washington. They've invested in training. These are reliable, dependable, important employees for these businesses. For the federal government to just make a decision unilaterally, removing those employees from those businesses can only be done through a process that this federal government has not done. One more claim I want to mention, and this, the relief we're asking here is very, very important, and it does not go to whether DACA could go forward or not, but the implications in a very important respect if it does. So the previous claims would stop it. Just want to be clear about that. Everything I've mentioned before would stop DACA from moving forward. We also have a due process claim. And what this goes to is how it would impact Dreamers and their families in a different way. The due process rights of Dreamers will be violated if information that they provided to the federal government is used against them or their families for immigration enforcement purposes. Something they were promised over and over and over again by the federal government would not happen. And yesterday's announcement makes no assurances that that information will not be used against them and their families, and that is not right. I'll have a few final comments after the governor speaks. You know, I know the governor and the folks who are up here with me agree, and you know, I try to think, what are the right words, right, for how outrageous this is. It's outrageous. It is. It's outrageous. You know, I'm not going to put up with it. The governor sure as hell is not going to put up with it. These folks aren't going to put up with it. It's not right. You know, and as Attorney General for the state of Washington, I fortunately have a hammer. It's the law. We've beaten the Trump administration over and over again. We are careful about the lawsuits we bring. We are thoughtful about the lawsuits we bring. And whenever I think about our lawsuits, we talk about the same questions. Are Washingtonians being harmed? Do we have good legal arguments? And do I have standing to bring the lawsuit on behalf of the people of the state? Man, when it comes to our Washingtonians being harmed, it doesn't get much bigger than this. Put yourself in their shoes. You're a dreamer. Our country is going to deport you back to a country you may not even know? Can it be more cruel than that? Honestly. It doesn't make any damn sense. Honestly. As a lawyer, though, I have to focus on the law, right? That's my training. That's my job. As cruel as it is importantly, however, also unlawful. And that's what this lawsuit is all about. So with that, I'm going to turn to the governor for his comments, and then we'll hear from the most important group here, which the governor and I both agree, which are the Dreamers themselves. Governor?
We all want to thank Bob for his thoughtful legal analysis and his strength of purpose to make sure that Washington State is protected. And this is yet another in a series of legal actions to insist that the basic values and the people we treasure in the state of Washington are protected. Bob, thanks for your leadership. We appreciate it. The state right now is under a dark pall, and it's not just the smoke from the fires. It is a dark pall of cruelty and inhumanity which has covered this land as a result of this president's willful, malicious bigotry, which has attempted to stifle the dreams of some of the strongest, most ambitious, most vibrant, most brilliant people in our blessed community, and that's the dreamers. And I understand that this darkness is a troubled time, but I want to say that the wave of revulsion, the wave of outrage, the voices that have been calling from across the United States is a good sign that the American dream is still alive and well. And in this dark time, we have a half a dozen bright lights of dreamers here today. So I want to say that we ought to be resolute and inspired by the voices we're hearing across the United States and here today in the state of Washington. Now, we know what this is. This is not an aberration by Donald Trump. This is not one fumble in an otherwise stellar career of protecting American values of fairness and justice. This is one more of a long chain and train of abuses that this president has attempted to foist on this bright nation. It started with his racial lie, claiming that our president wasn't born in the United States. It was followed by his clear intent to ban people of one religious faith from the United States. And it is followed up now with yet another chapter in the long, terrible ordeal that is being written by this president. And when we are claiming there is a violation of due process, you bet we are right, because it's just what Donald Trump does. When he's in trouble, he tries to blame the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. And that is yet what we are seeing here today. He's in trouble on multiple fronts, and he's trying to take it out on dreamers, and that is unacceptable in our state. Now, here's one of the reasons it's unacceptable. I understand the careful analysis by Bob on this, but here's how I look at it. Uncle Sam went to these dreamers and said, if you will open up your lives to me, tell us where you live, tell us where you were born, telling us where we can find you, we will make sure that the door is open to the American dream. Donald Trump wants to now have Uncle Sam pull the rug out from underneath these dreamers. Well, I don't know, you can say what you want about the current occupant of the White House, but Uncle Sam is not a con man. And we will not allow this con to be perpetrated on the dreamers. And it is a con. Now, let me tell you what the nature of this, how I look at this. I remember I met a young man in Tacoma. He was in high school. And this is when we were trying to pass our version of the DREAM Act, which we eventually passed in the state of Washington to make sure these people had access to financial aid. And this young man said, you know, Governor, you expect us to graduate, you urge us to graduate, but then when we graduate, you won't help us go to college. Now we're going to turn around to these people. We've said if you keep your nose clean and work hard and go to college and go to school, we're going to pull the rug out from under you. That is a con, and it is a long train of cons that has tried to be foisted on this country by this president, and it will not stand. Now, the president did not even have the common decency to go out and face the American people with this outrage. He sent somebody else. And I think that's a testament to a little lack of courage in this regard. And now the president is trying to say, well, just go blame Congress. You don't have to blame me. Well, I want to make clear what is the current status here. The president wants to hold these dreamers hostage in the not always enlightened halls of Congress. And you can be assured at this moment that many of the members of Congress who are expressing rightful emotional empathy with the Dreamers are scheming for a way to use them as hostages to get some other legislative goal that they want. Maybe it's a wall that isn't going to be built. Maybe it's a tax cut that they want. Maybe it's something else. I'm here to say these people should be treated better than being hostages. And if the president would go out there tomorrow like he should, which is to ask Congress to pass a DREAM Act, a standalone clean act next week, perhaps we could do it. But that's not what's going on here. And people got to realize that this is a hostage-taking exercise. Now, one other comment about why this is important to the state of Washington. It is important from a sense of justice, but it is also important on the ability of our state to build an economy. Yesterday I was at breakfast just a few blocks from here, and Howard Behar, a former leader of Starbucks, came over and said, hey, is there anything I can do about this? I've got 5 people working for me today in leadership positions who are here because of the Daca program. This is going to hurt my business. This is going to hurt the economy of the state of Washington. And by the way, I don't know about you, but I was a little offended when I heard Jeff Sessions trying to tell these people assert they're sort of related to gang members somehow. These are business leaders. And in fact, a review has shown that Dreamers are starting businesses at almost twice the rate as non-Dreamers. These are the people who are building our economy. And they ought to be seen as business leaders, not hostages. So I want to thank Bob's efforts. I look forward to yet another success, and I look forward to that dream being kept alive. We still believe in America. I know these people behind me do too, and we believe we're going to win this ultimately.
Thanks, Governor. Thank you very much, Governor. And so now, as I mentioned more, we'll hear from each of the Dreamers. First, 4 Dreamers will briefly introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll hear from 2 Dreamers, starting with Paulo, who will speak in more detail about their thoughts. And I think we're going to start with Graciela. Graciela, go right ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Graciela Nunez. I am 22 years old. I am a recent graduate from the University of Washington. I came to the United States when I was 7 years old from Caracas, Venezuela, a country that is now being ravaged by a possible civil war. I paid my way through college by being a College Success Foundation scholar and being a Mary Gates Leadership Scholar. I am currently working at a law firm, at a humanitarian immigration law firm, and I am an aspiring law school student where I will be studying for the LSAT and taking it in December.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jose Manuel Carrillo. I came to the United States at the age of 8 from Lima, Peru, and I am a DACA recipient. Thanks to DACA, and as well as the DREAM Act here in this state, I have been able to graduate from Western Washington University and been able to work as a community organizer with Bellingham's organization Community to Community, as well as the Tension Watch Network based in DC. And I'm currently helping lead efforts here in Washington with a campaign called Defund Hate. I want to thank the Attorney General as well as other allies for standing up both for Dreamers as well as the rest of the undocumented community.
Hi everyone, my name is Ray Corona. I am from Mexico City. I came to the US at the age of 9. I'm a DACA recipient. I also serve on the City of Seattle LGBTQ Commission, and I run an LGBTQ nonprofit. I want to thank Governor Inslee and also Attorney General Bob Ferguson for standing with our community today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Mustafa Padilla. I am a DACA recipient. I came to the US at the age of 2 years. And have been living in Seattle, Washington for the last 15 years of my life. I grew up right across the bridge from Delridge and went to Chiefs Health High School, graduated as an International Baccalaureate student, attended the University of Washington, and for the last 10 years I have been organizing LGBTQ and immigrant communities to strengthen our communities as a whole. The values that we hold as Americans is a value of unity and strength because this country was built on immigrants' labor. I'm here representing the 75,000 LGBTQ immigrants who are living in this country in fear of deportation, the 36,000 LGBTQ identified immigrants who have applied for Deferred Action, and the 22,000 who are looking to renew once again. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Paulo Quinones Figueroa. When I was 5 years old, my father made the difficult decision to move to the United States. At that time, my brother had just been born, and he needed to move here for better economic opportunities to provide for the both of us. For the next couple of years, he would go visit us home as often as was possible, and then it became apparent that they had to face a difficult decision. Due to the lack of economic opportunities and the family separation that we were suffering, we decided that the best decision was for the whole family to move to the U.S. and be reunited here. Once in the U.S., I grew up in the Tri-Cities and was fortunate enough to receive DACA as I was graduating high school with my associate's degree at the same time, thanks to the state's Running Start program. DACA has enabled me to qualify for additional private aid and later state financial aid that allowed me to complete my BA in Economics and Political Science at Gonzaga University. It also allowed me to access on-campus jobs to pay my way through school. More importantly, it enabled me to put my degree to good use once I graduated and was able to enter the workforce. With the announced end to DACA, I would once again be to deportation and would no longer be able to serve my fellow Washingtonians through my current job at the state legislature. Faced with this moral imperative, the legal action taken by Attorney General Ferguson and others is the right course of action to pursue. It is now up to AG Ferguson to hold the administration accountable to the promises it has made in the past, and to use the rule of law to protect the most vulnerable populations as he did during the Muslim ban. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Faride Cuevas, and I am an undocumented member of our community. And I am also a current DACA recipient. I am speaking with you today to respond to the cruel, heartbreaking, and immoral decision the President has made to rescind the Daca program. Our community has long played an essential role in this nation's economy, but our worthiness cannot just be measured by our economic contribution. This is about who we are as part of this nation. This is about our humanity, morals, and values. I came to this country when I was 9 years old. I grew up in Skagit Valley, earned my associates at Skagit Valley College, and continued my education at the University of Washington Bothell campus. My educational achievements were only possible thanks to my family's support, as well as the many advocates that make tuition equity laws a reality in this state. This includes our Governor Jay Inslee for signing the Washington Dream Act into law in February 2014. Thanks to DACA, over the last 3 years, I've been able to serve the people of the state by participating in an internship at the Washington State House of Representatives, working as a legislative assistant to Representative Ortiz-El from the 21st Legislative District, and currently as a legislative assistant to King County Councilmember Co. Wells. In all of these roles, I've had the opportunity to learn from incredible community organizers and public servants who are committed to building a more welcoming, inclusive, and just society for all. This is the time to support community-led efforts and courageous leaders like our State Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who is working with other attorney generals from around the country to sue the Trump administration and to compel Congress to take action on this issue. Lastly, I want to say I'm proud and grateful for my parents. Our families make us stronger, and our community will not be divided. We have all shown our work, or else we would not be standing here. We're just as American as your children, as your neighbors. Thank you.
So thanks again to all of you for being here and having the courage to speak and tell your stories. We really appreciate it. With that, we'll open to questions. What we'll do, I know we have folks on the line. We probably have a lot of folks with questions. We'll start with some questions here in the room. I'll do my best to repeat the question so that folks on the line can hear it, and then we will answer them. Then I'll try and turn to take a few questions on the phone and maybe come back for one or more two here. Obviously, the governor, myself, and maybe others here are available afterwards for one-on-one conversations as well. So let's get started right here in the room with anyone who might have a question. Yes?
Just to clarify, it's 11 states and the District of Columbia?
So the question is how many states in the District of Columbia? And I believe last count's 11 states and the District of Columbia, 12 plaintiffs altogether, correct?
Okay. And will there be a copy of the lawsuit available later today?
Yes, it literally will be filed momentarily. It's just logistics of getting everything signed and formatted. But yes, that'll be coming any minute now. and we'll make that available, obviously, right away. Essex?
What from the experience of the travel ban lawsuit gives you confidence that you can also win this lawsuit?
That's a good question. So Essex is asking for those in line. What experience in the travel ban litigation gives us confidence that we'll be successful with this lawsuit? I guess a couple thoughts on that.
We got a great lawyer.
There you go. That was the governor saying that for those on the line. You know, the travel ban litigation was unique in the sense that we were the first state to go forward to take on the administration on a big high-profile issue, and look, you're just going to learn a lot from an experience like that in many ways, right? One thing I discovered, I mean, something I already knew, of course, right? But until you're going through an intense experience like that, as high profile as that was, is you get to know your team very, very well, right? And so, I've always had a lot of confidence in my team, but it's safe to say that that was only reinforced in a significant way through that experience. Keep in mind, for the travel ban litigation, if you turned on Anderson Cooper, there was not a legal expert on his show who said we were going to win that case, and we won it. Federal government paid our costs and fees for having to respond to their appeal to Ninth Circuit, then they conceded and rescinded that first travel ban. We won, plain and simple. And very few people thought we would. But my legal team had a strong view, and I think that helps with this, that all these cases present their own challenges anytime you sue an administration. Each has its own challenges. They are never easy. But we have a process now for how we handle these. We try to be very thoughtful about it. We know each other well, and I appreciate the coordination with other states. I think we've benefited from that. We've been through this a few times before, so I've been in regular contact with some AGs around the country on this. So I think all that experience comes together. There's a level of trust, but at the end of the day, Essex, look, I have to compartmentalize a little bit. As outrageous as I think this is from a policy standpoint, our analysis here, we're a law firm, right? We have to go where the law takes us, and we believe we have good legal arguments, and I do think that a federal court should ultimately decide whether or not what the president did was lawful or not.
I want to take a crack. I want to take a crack at
Governor, go right ahead.
Essex.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
I want to give a serious answer to that serious question. There's two reasons we have confidence. One, we do have an excellent legal team. This group has done tremendous work. I saw what they did when SeaTac melted down because of the cruelty of Donald Trump. They sprung into action. These people are top-notch. But there's a second, more fundamental reason. We have an independent judiciary. The judiciary did not claim that Barack Obama was born in Kenya. The judiciary system did not say that Muslims should be banned. The judiciary did not give a pass to a convicted criminal in Arizona who was found guilty of being racially discriminatory to people. And the judicial system does not have it like Donald Trump has, that when he's in trouble, to try to pick on people to throw red meat to his base. It's a different system. And by the way, I think there's an important point here. The president has said he did this because he just wanted to act legally, because he has such magnificent respect for the law. Where was that magnificent respect when he pardoned a convicted criminal who had been acting in a discriminatory basis against people who were Hispanic? And within 2 weeks, he turns around and wants to take hostage to whatever he wants on the wall or the tax cuts or anything else, the Latino dreamers. This is a naked, ugly event, and it will not stand.
Other questions here in the room? Yes. So we'll come back over here next. Yeah, go ahead.
So with regard to the due process claim in particular, do you need to show that the government is actually relying on the information that the dreamers have provided in order to show any injury? I mean, is that premature at this point?
So the question, I'll repeat, and then I'll ask if Pauline or Marcia want to assist on this. The question goes to that due process claim, the last claim that I talked about on the privacy information. And do we have to actually show that it is being used, I think is the question, as part of our claim. And so it looks like Colleen will address that. Colleen, go ahead.
Sure. So the due process claim requires that the government be fundamentally fair in its immigration enforcement procedures when it has made these repeated, consistent, and clear representations to dreamers and their families that this DACA information would not be used for enforcement. They've said only in the most exceptional circumstances would it be used. And yesterday we saw nothing of that in the announcement. There's no guarantee. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, operates a uniform information system so that ICE and USCIS, the arm of DHS that operates DACA, they have the same access to information. And so DHS is not allowed to betray Dreamers by changing its mind about the promises that it made over the last 5 years about how this information would be protected.
Yes.
Obviously, there's 10 attorneys general that are Republicans that have alleged this is unconstitutional and threatened legal action. Is there any potential for this lawsuit to lead to some sort of ruling that this was unconstitutional in the first place and circumvented Congress's authority? Or am I not a lawyer and just don't understand how this stuff works?
Do you want to try and paraphrase? Colleen will paraphrase the question. I may add to it. Do you want to? Yeah.
Sure. I think the question was, is there a potential that this lawsuit, that other attorneys could backfire and that there could be a finding that it's unconstitutional? So one of the bases for our claims are that the government has relied entirely yesterday for purposes of rescinding the program, for saying, well, it was unlawful. We're assuming it was unlawful. No court has decided that, but we're assuming it was, and so we're dismantling the program. That's one reason why we think this was an unlawful decision, but it's not the only one. All of the process sort of claims that Attorney General Ferguson mentioned are really real. And the reason that they matter is because it allows businesses to comment, it allows states to comment, it allows individuals and their families to explain to Congress what sort of the implication of this kind of a decision is, and explain to regulatory agencies. So that claim would still survive. There's also the discriminatory motive claim. So even if an otherwise sort of acceptable decision could be made, it can't be made if it's based on a sort of a desire to harm a particular group or with an impact on that group that hasn't been properly justified.
I'm going to add something.
Go right
if I
ahead,
can.
yeah, absolutely. Of
I'm
course.
sorry to
No,
jump in too much,
go
but,
right ahead. No, jump right in.
whatever risk or expense is involved in this litigation, it is necessary and justified. And the reason is that we have learned you cannot trust Donald Trump on anything. And no matter what he says about how this information may be used, you cannot trust it. It is an administration based on deceit. And on this case, let me tell you one of the reasons I'm so outraged by this. At a National Governors Association meeting several months ago, I brought the issue of the Dreamers up personally, eyeball to eyeball with General Kelly, who at the time was the Director of Homeland Security. And at the time, this was in his jurisdiction. And I expressed to him that I had 17,000 people whose lives were on hold because of the uncertainty as to what the administration was going to do. And he told me in no uncertain terms, you don't have to worry about the Dreamers. We are not going to go after the Dreamers. He said, I have won that battle. And frankly, from what I know, I think he's probably on the right side of the angels on this personally. But when he said, I have won that battle, I assumed that he won against Breitbart News. But he lost, because the administration has now thrown them to the wolves in Congress and have jerked the rug out from under them. So when you have the Director of Homeland Security tell me, a governor, that you don't have to worry about the Dreamers, and a few months later they pull the rug out from under, you cannot trust them. Litigation is absolutely necessary.
Let's do one more here in the room, and then we'll take a couple from the telephone. Go right ahead.
Why is the case being filed in New York?
The question is, why is the case being filed in New York? Anytime you have multiple states, right, everyone's got to agree on a particular location, and New York is a logical place for us. Look, I gave a lot of thought to, hey, should we file our own case here in the Western District of Washington? It's just part of the process that goes through in filing any case. When you have multiple states, we have to agree on I felt at the end of the day, there was a strength in numbers consolidating in one location, and so the AGs, the three, in particular Massachusetts, New York, and Washington, as I mentioned before, were really the co-leads early on, and we felt New York was the right place to go. That said, if I did not mention earlier, but I do anticipate other lawsuits. I wouldn't be surprised if other states file their own lawsuit or join this one. We can amend our complaint later on and add to states, much like I do with the travel ban. We went first with Minnesota, other states, and joined in later on. So it'll remain fluid for some period of time as other states consider getting in as well. So why don't we move to the telephone and see, I know it's tricky with a lot of folks on the line to not jump on top of one another, but if we're happy to try and take a question or two on the line, so go right ahead. Dan, is it open for folks to ask questions? It should be. Anyone have a question online? If not, I think we're having a little hard time hearing, so I'll go back to the room here. Yes, go right ahead.
So as you know, some people have commented that since
So that was a multi-part question, particularly on due process. I'll have Colleen start just to make sure we get off on the right track, and I may add to it. One of those you may have answered already earlier, the last piece of it. Why don't you try and paraphrase and give an initial response? I may add to it.
Sure. So I think the last two parts of the question, you might have to remind us about the first part, but was sort of, does due process require us to show that the government is using or is going to use the DACA information for enforcement, and to confirm whether discrimination is part of the due process claim? So the answer to that one is yes, it is part of the due process claim. That discrimination or a desire to sort of appease this discriminatory motive, to speak to a discriminatory motive, is an improper reason for executive action, whether it's the whole reason or part of the reason. So the answer to that is yes. On the information and data sharing, no. We think that the action that the government took yesterday was breaking that promise. The government, on its website, on all of the information that it made available to Dreamers, they had frequently asked questions: will my information be used for enforcement? Will my family members' information be available to USCIS, to ICE? And they took all those FAQs that said, no, we will not share that information with ICE. They disappeared yesterday off the web. And so the idea that we need some sort of demonstrated coordinated activity on the part of ICE to make that claim ripe is just wrong, given all of the repeated and clear promises that the government made to Dreamers in order to get them to apply.
And if I could just clarify, are parents' names actually part of the application to DACA recipients with their parents' names in there?
So it depends a little bit on the application, but family members' names can certainly be part of an application, including if they submit a birth certificate. And so that's why when DACA was originally created, a lot of Dreamers had, I think, hesitation about submitting an application and giving this information to the government. That's why the government responded by creating these FAQs and these repeated, as I've said, consistent representations that the information will be kept safe. And that promise was broken yesterday.
Okay, but can you or the AG please speak to my first point about the executive action creating DACA instead of being able to take that away?
Julie, anything you want to add on that? I mean, it's
Sure. So the
Why don't
question
you
is,
repeat the question, Ted?
sure. The question is, if DACA was created by executive action, can it be just taken away with a stroke of a pen? And the answer is no. There are a number of reasons why that can't be the case. Once a program of this complexity and detail has been put into place, there are procedures that are required to unwind it. Those are the ones that we were talking about. And then just on a question of pure discretion, a lawful discretionary decision can never be made if one component of that is an improper motive of discrimination or animus. And so even if it were otherwise fully legal, even if the process pieces went away, right, we would be saying that there's an improper motive at play here. And we know that because look, they relied on this legal theory. They've said there's a legal reason. We have a gun to our head. There's this legal reason why we have to cancel it. But they didn't do that for the first 8 months of the administration. And in fact, yesterday they told us that even though it's illegal, they can extend it another 6 months. Now, don't get me wrong. We're happy they did that. They would have a whole host of other legal problems if they had canceled it immediately. So we're not advocating for that. But if it's this unconstitutional and unlawful program, I don't see how the administration has granted itself the discretion to extend it another 6 months. And I think what that tells you is that there's something else going on here.
Yes, let's do one more question here, and then I'll probably have the governor say a final thought. I will as well. Then we'll be available afterwards for questions. Go right ahead.
So lawsuits take a long time.
They do,
So
sometimes.
The program doesn't expire until next
Correct.
year. But do you anticipate a judge ruling that there will be, DACA will remain in place until this lawsuit is resolved, or what's likely to happen?
Thanks for asking that question. I probably should have addressed that. So the question for those online went to kind of where do we go from here on the legal standpoint? How quickly will things happen? How quickly might a court rule? What's the process going forward? I'm glad you asked that because, for example, on the travel ban, we went to court and asked for a temporary restraining order to stop it from happening because it was in place already and harm was being done. And within a week, we had it shut down. This is different. So at least not initially, we're not going to hold ourselves in going forward. But with our complaint that we're filing today, we are not filing with it, for example, something similar. We're not seeking an injunction or a temporary restraining order. So we'll start with a normal process that a case would have. A judge would get assigned, give a scheduling order, laying out the timing for it. Parties would move forward accordingly. So At this point, things can change. I want to emphasize again, it's very, very fluid on many levels. But at this point, we're not asking for that type of restraining order or injunction that would necessitate a legal hearing in a matter of days, right, to get before a judge. So it's different from the travel ban in that very important way. But yes, we're before a judge, and we'll see what the scheduling order is and which judge we're assigned. So, Governor, I'm going to ask you to maybe have a few final thoughts. I may have final thoughts, and we'll avail for questions afterwards. Governor?
Just a couple things. One, the fear of having this information, which they volunteered, under the promise that it not be used, is not the only reason this is manifestly unfair and cruel. It also, under existing state law, would deny dreamers the ability to come in and become eligible for DACA to get financial aid so that they can go to school. So we would have spent 12 years educating dreamers, inspiring them to graduate from high school, but then because of something Donald Trump did out of racial animus, denying them the ability to finance their college education. So there are damage to these people and their dreams above and beyond the fact that it just creates anxiety that this information will be used to deport them. The second thing I would point out, the president has attempted to shirk responsibility for this. But let's be clear, it is his hand on the knife in these people's backs. And he can't just put it on Congress. It is his responsibility to fix this. He should fix this executive order if he ever does it, and he should go to Congress and say, you should pass Monday a DREAM Act to solve this problem. And he's not doing that, and it's pretty clear why. He's got ulterior motives at play here. But I'll just say one thing. I know how much anxiety dreamers are having right now. I think it is our obligation to wrap our arms around them, to be vocal in Congress, to demand that they pass a solution to this right away. If they got to put off their desire to give tax cuts to billionaires for a few weeks to turn their attention to this, they should do it. These people deserve that. And when members of Washington talk to their members of Congress, do not listen to that shuck and jive about how they're going to get around to it in some odd month. They owe a solution right now that doesn't hold these people hostage.
Thanks, Governor, again, for your strong support and your leadership on this and many other issues that are facing our country right now. A very special thank you to all the Dreamers who are here today joining us and speaking. I really can't thank you enough for your willingness to come down here. You know, it's our goal to make sure that all these individuals and the other 17,000 Dreamers in our state and the hundreds of thousands around the country are allowed to stay in the country in exactly the same way they are and have been. You know, it's my goal that Graciela will go to law school and apply for a job right here at the AG's office, no pressure. And I'll look forward to seeing that application when it comes in. But, you know, that's what it's about. It's, right, leaders and future leaders of our state and our community. You know, every lawsuit that we bring, you know, there's obviously something important at stake. It's always the case with the law. You know, on this one, there's a lot at stake, and that's putting it mildly. I'm not sure I have the words to truly capture how much is at stake. I'm not sure anyone can. I suspect even hard for the Dreamers here to put in words how deeply yesterday's action impacts them and their families. So to conclude, you know, I just want the people of the state to know that we will do everything we can in our power in this office to uphold the legal rights of the 17,000 Dreamers in the state. I'm committed to using every legal tool that I have at my disposal to doing that. I'm really proud of the work of my team here in the office, who have worked very hard, again, on this issue. And I do want to say the AGs around the country, look, it's a team effort. And I think it speaks to the organization of Democratic AGs that we can work together so efficiently that the day after this was announced that we've got 12 plaintiffs on board with a very complex complaint with declarations from all around the country, and we're all on the same page. And with that, I want to thank everybody for being here, and we'll be available for questions after. Thank you very much.